Hello, my lovelies. Happy Disability Pride Month. I know I disappeared in there for a few weeks. It's been hectic. It wasn't for a lack of trying. Good morning, my lovelies. Welcome back.
Hello, welcome back. Hi friends, welcome back to my channel.
If you are new to my channel, my name is Isa. I recently graduated with my master's in communication studies with a research focus in disability culture and identity. I am also currently a Disney College program participant. All of that doesn't matter today because, well, maybe the master's degree a little bit, but today I want to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is the disability tropes, or ranking the disability tropes that I hate the most in fiction. So we're going to go through my list. Little disclaimer, this list is in the order of my personal opinions, and it's not even like my strongest opinions. It's just more of the stuff that like really bugs me. If I did it based off of like harm to the community, it'd be a completely different order. However, this is just kind of like what my family has to hear me rant about the most. And a couple of things I've already talked about on my YouTube. So let's jump into the 5. Such a disaster. Okay, let's jump into the 5 things I hate most in disability tropes. If you have done any research on disability media or just kind of passively observed, you would notice that there isn't a lot of disability representation, especially when the actors who are disabled play disabled characters. It is very, very rare. In fact, we have more people who received awards for playing disabled characters and the Oscars specifically, than we do have actual disabled actors playing themselves in movies. Not themselves, but their own disability. Yeah, it's interesting. Anyway, with the lack of representation, there are some very harmful tropes that we tend to see whenever a disabled character comes onto screen, the book, media, whatever you have it be. Today, let's start with number 5. That is that when disability is used as the motivation, major form of conflict, or makes the person evil. There's a couple examples of this. Me Before You has the big motivation conflict being how bad the disability is and how awful it is to live as a disabled person. The Mobius movie is literally the biggest motivation for the Mobius character was to find a cure for his disability. We also have the Nevers, the disabled person is the villain. A lot of times disability is the motivation for villainy, that life is so hard, doctors don't listen, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to try to fix my disability, which is a very like restrictive view of disability. Generally, it centers on this idea that disability is this terrible, awful thing and can be used as a way for the audience to not necessarily empathize with the villain, more so to kind of pity them. And it's really interesting when it happens because also another thing, so we have the pity, but we also have the like patronization of disabled people. So a lot of times having the villain be disabled, what you're doing is kind of making the characters, you're trying to get the audience to look the other way. That, oh, this person can't be the bad guy because they're disabled, and then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, it's the wheelchair user, it's the disabled person, it's the innocent person. And while the concept of innocence is also a trope when it comes to disabled representation, it is not effectively used in this particular trope because you're still playing into that idea that it is evil, it is bad, that disability gets people to do awful, awful things, while also kind of playing on that innocent because they just don't know better or something like that. They're desperate, whatever you want to do. It's annoying. I hate it. I don't despise it as much as the next one. The next one is the inspirational, sad, whatever, death of disabled characters. If you saw my video on Cyrano, which it's an old play, so spoiler warning, whatever, you would have seen my perspective on this particular issue. And then what really bothered me is the fact that Cyrano died. I literally started this movie making a joke to my mom going, haha, if Cyrano dies, I'm going to, like, leave. I'm going to be so mad. I hated it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. The reason why it is so low on this list, though, is because as someone who writes disability fiction, I also write a lot about death, and a lot of my characters die, but they're also they're dealing with the concept of death and afterlife and that kind of stuff. So I can't put it too high because I am also someone who kills characters a lot, and I really like the, like, you know, sacrifice at the end. I think that's a really cool concept. However, when it comes to disability, a lot of times it's not the disabled person sacrificing themselves as, like, a person who's making that decision, more so that their life's not worth living, so they're going to sacrifice themselves, or that they just die and that their death is motivation for other characters to come together and do their thing, or their death is what triggered somebody to go off on their adventure, their journey to start learning and growing after their disabled person's death. It gets a little frustrating when that happens, because it happens a lot, and it gets really complicated because there are some disabilities that have terminal aspects to them, but when you only represent disabled characters that are terminal, when you only represent, because you're not even doing great representation of that, but only represent disabled characters who could die from their condition, and only representing, like, this small fraction from a very able-bodied, inspiration-porny lens, then it gets really frustrating. Cyrano was one of them that, like, really frustrated me because there was no reason for him to die. And he didn't even die in battle. He just died from illness. Like, there is no reason for him to die. There is no logical reason for it, and they just wanted to do it because if you have a disabled character and you can't cure them, we gotta kill them. So this leads me to my next trope that I hate desperately, and that is the magical cure. The magical cure is not one that do see a lot. It's generally when the protagonist has some type of disabling event in their life, and then they are cured from that event. And granted, like, these tropes can be used at various times and negated at other times. So one example of this, just as a generic example, would be in Avatar: Legend of Korra. Korra loses her powers in the first season, then gets them back magically at the end of that kind of big arc. Now, Korra does become disabled in other ways throughout the season. I do kind of like that representation a little bit. There could have been more nuance to it, but just the aspect that we have to continually cure the disability, it leaves a really narrow view of disability, like everything else, but it also doesn't reflect dynamic aspects of disability. If you would like to represent, sometimes they're feeling really good, sometimes they're feeling really bad, that is a very legitimate disability experience. And I think the number one problem with the disabled cure is that it's just frustrating, and it's old, and it's generally the beginning or the end of someone's journey, and that kind of plays into that idea that disability is part of the motivation. Another example is Yennefer from The Witcher. One of her big arcs starts off with curing her disability. So that's super boring, honestly. Just really boring. Really, really boring storytelling. Not unique at all, and doesn't really reflect a lot of disabled individuals' relationships with concepts of cure. It also, let me explain also, is that a lot of times when you have cancer, which is typically where we see a lot of disability representation, you have to recognize that there are disabling aspects to that for the rest of your life. A lot of times when you have a medical crisis that temporarily disables you, you might get better, but that doesn't mean that you become the person that you were before and that you aren't still somewhat disabled. So even if I, who has mitochondrial disease, had a cure for mitochondrial congenital disease today, which means that I never get worse, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not going to have some forms of disability, because my body has been so damaged over the course of my life from my condition. So really what's missing is the dynamic aspect to disability and the magical cure. And again, when we have a magical cure, especially for physical illness, there are ways to talk about it, but it needs to be led by disabled people because it is a disabled experience. The only caveat to always being bad is being deaf and autism and other neurodivergencies, because those disabilities are not ones that put people's lives at risk, and I think are just a very different experience and very specific cultures and communities that need to be touched on in a very strategic manner, and again led by members of those sub communities within the disability community. This leads me to my number 2, which is they were never disabled to begin with. And a lot of this has to do with the concept of Munchausen's by proxy. If you're not familiar with that, it is reducing it down to its bare minimum, is that parents who want a lot of attention may make their child sick in order to continue to receive that attention. And it was very, very popular. Everything was one of the books that played into that idea. Spoiler alert, I don't really care. It's a dumb trope and you probably shouldn't even read the book. But the concept that the person has never been actually disabled, it is only disabled by their parents, by their family members. And it's really frustrating to be like, oh, here's my experience as a disabled person, but never mind, none of it actually matters, and I'm gonna get out of my wheelchair and do life because I didn't realize it, or something like that. It really simplifies this Munchausen's to a point that doesn't provide nuance of people's experiences and kind of makes it part of the thriller horror genre a lot of times, and that's just really inappropriate. And then the second aspect of that is that the magical caveat. And I do include this in the magical caveat because it's a way for people to, writers specifically, directors, that kind of stuff, to include disabled characters without having to ever rationalize hiring disabled actors, while also not playing in the disability field. We have Daredevil, and the whole point is that the disability is used in the plot as a way to subvert people's expectations that he is blind, but that blindness gave him specific powers that allows him to do X, Y, and Z. I also include Toph Beifong in this trope, even though she is fully disabled in the show. Please don't come for me. I understand. However, a lot of blind individuals that I have followed, videos I have seen, have talked about how Toph is actually not the greatest representation for blindness because of her ability to kind of see based off of the vibrations aspect of her powers. Now, I do say that with acknowledgement that I do think that Toph Beifong is one of the better disability representations that we have for the community and what it means to be disabled and what it means to be disabled in specific environments by people, that kind of stuff, because the disability is the embodied experience interacting with the world around you. So please understand the nuance when I say that, but it is something that we need to talk about. That a lot of these tropes are things that, yeah, maybe there's some characters or concepts that can be really cool in using these tropes. However, when it's the only thing we see over and over and over again, it really can be lazy writing and also hurt the community overall. And it's just kind of annoying too when you're looking for disability representation and you read a book and it's like, it didn't really matter. So anyway, let's get into some of my honorable mentions. Let's get into some of my honorable mentions. First one is chickening out of disability conversations of disability. So this is not necessarily a trope, but for example, the nevers was a really interesting concept to me. It uses the concept of the freak show, plays on a lot of disability experiences, even uses some disability language when talking about person first versus identity first language, and kind of like that nuance of conversations a disabled person might have with able-bodied people and trying to create space for themselves. And I do think that there's really interesting aspects, but it was done in a way to like, oh, this isn't about disability, this is about this other thing. It's used as a metaphor. And what you could have done with that plot, what you could have reflected, what you could have, like really dove into is that concept of the freak show from the disability lens, how it interplays with racism and sexism and all of the like isms, because ableism is a very intersectional issue as it relates to other people, and how life events as a marginalized individual with other identities could cause you to go through experiences that disable you. So all of that fascinating things to discuss needs to be led by a disabled person, of course, but they really can flesh out a plot and make it something new and interesting if you just had the guts to do it. You just need to like go for it. Go for it, hire the disabled people, hire disabled actors, and actually see what kind of plot that we can have that explores disability in a way that isn't just the same old I'm scared of becoming disabled trope. Like, it's it's frustrating to see people so terrified of disabled bodies. Now, my second honorable mention is the fact that a lot of times when we do have explicit disability representation, they are the only disabled person. Even in Avatar: The Last Airbender, we have Toph and we have the wheelchair user. I don't remember his name. I'm thinking it was Kai, maybe. Anyway, but they really, I think, only interact at like one point. And when you talk about disability, when you have disabled characters, you really, really, really need to acknowledge the fact that the disability community is one that is very, very connected, that we have negotiated resources for ourselves, that when we talk about accessibility, especially in reflection to the ADA and Disability Pride Month in the United States, that it's really important to talk about the fact that we are connected, that we use each other for resources, for support swapping, for guidance on how to deal with our disabilities. A lot of times, disabled individuals, we might have able-bodied people in our lives who help us manage our disabilities, who do X, Y, and Z. But at the end of the day, when you're trying to tell a story from the disabled perspective, which more places should do, that you highly depend on other disabled people to teach you how to be disabled in this world. An able-bodied, non-disabled person can give their best advice based off of the people in their life, but truly it is other disabled people who give you the best guidance and mentorship. The final trope, and I know I'm going to become, I think I'm going to get number one in trouble for the Toph Beifong thing, and then number two, the fact that I'm making this my number one thing that I hate, and that is disabled people who don't get to use magic. I am a fantasy person. I freaking love fantasy. I love fantasy so much. Fantasy and like a slight sci-fi, steampunky kind of thing. So many times, so many times, when you have a fantasy world, a lot of people make disability, the metaphor for disability, not having access to the magic. So many places just decide, nope, you're disabled, you don't get to do magic because that's too complicated for you. And it's even like with Yennefer, there's also what it's called. It's like the X-Men TV show. I'm gonna put the title like right here. Gifted, that's what it's called. Even in Gifted, there was like an episode where they went to this facility and they had disabled characters who had like superpowers, and I thought that was really cool and fascinating because I've always felt, as someone who has a genetic mutation, very connected to the X-Men, very connected to the concept of mutants, and especially the aspects of like the mutant community coming together, like very, very cool concepts. And to have disability representation in that way was really nice, except this facility was trying to cure the powers and stuff of the disabled people. Like, there's one person with Down syndrome that I think they were like, no, she doesn't need a cure. But like a lot of people, they were just trying to cure their magic because it was either, or not magic, their superpowers, because it was being too disabling for them, or they just didn't think that the disabled person could handle it. So that's frustrating. But also when it's used as a metaphor, like Harry Potter, when we talk about squibs, that like there was a lot of like disability representation, not representation, but like, this is disabled and this is how people are talking about it. It's a metaphor for disability, and it wasn't like a metaphor of like, oh, this is for disabled people. It is a metaphor for able-bodied, non-disabled people. And like, this is the fear you have of disability, so we're going to tell this story because it is a fear of having a disabled body. So this is about disability. So that is the one that I hate the most. I've talked about it on here before, I think. It drives me absolutely nuts. If you know of any good stories where there are disabled characters with powers, I would love to see it, especially if it's like not negating the disability, that is an aspect of disability. I have a story that I really need to like actually dive into working a little bit harder on, that like the concept that I have in it that I think is really exciting is that disability, like the experience of being disabled, gives you a new perspective on the magic system. And it's not necessarily that your disabled body automatically gives you like these extra superpowers or whatever. It's that having a disabled body makes you have to go through a process of listening better and learning alternative ways that ultimately make you a stronger magic user overall, that it's taught in the community. So like, that's really cool concepts to me, which is why I want to write it. But if you know of any stories, please comment them down below, because I am a huge reader. I read 17 books last month. I'm slowing down because I'm like writing a little bit more this month. But yeah, what are some of the tropes that you hate the most? What do you disagree with me? I know I'm gonna get like a lot of people who are like, this is this or this is that. Please do, because I like debating and just like listening to other people's opinions. So look out for other videos this month on disability. I'm also going to be posting stuff in August since I started so late, and I'll see you real soon.